We're very happy that you've spent the time with us to attend this webinar, especially with it being a high season for vacations in here. So our subject today is not so much technical related, but it gives an overview of how pigments are developed within Sudarshan. This is something that's probably not unusual for most people, but I did want to give you a glimpse of how we do this in Sudarshan. So I am recording this webinar, and so for all of those of you that are in attendance, you'll receive a link to the recording that you can share with others in your team, as well as the PDF of the presentation. And if you have any questions, feel free to use the chat box, or if that's not your thing, you can send me an email directly, and I can address those as well. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started, and I will actually, so that it isn't as distracting for me, I'm going to turn off my video in there, so you should be able to still see my screen. Maybe not. Anyway, so we'll go ahead and get started. So with pigments, of course, it's always going to be chemistry related. And however, it's definitely more than just chemistry when we develop a new product. It takes people of all types to do this. We need idea generators. We need people who are great motivators. Those who are good and comfortable at questioning to make sure that we're staying on track and we're doing the right thing. We also need those who are very good at planning. These developments that tend to take anywhere from 6 months, could be up to 18 months to get from start to finish. So a good plan is always very important for success. As you can imagine, it takes a lot of ideas to get to that final one product launch. So it is a good idea to have a process that can whittle through all of the ideas and take them from one step to the next step. And to do that, we require a pretty disciplined development process. And in Sudarshan, we do use the stage gate process, which contains 5 main stages, which start out with discovery, scoping, then defining the business case, testing and validation, and launching. In addition, there are gates in between each of the stages where the team, notice I emphasize the word team, decides whether or not to move to the next step or return back to the previous step for another iteration. Movement between stages is always going to be based on the business case, how well this program fits into the overall objectives and strategy of the business, risk analysis, as well as other factors such as cost, how much human resources are going to be required to be able to bring this to completion, and what kind of market competency there is around this product development. Of course, every process needs to be adaptable to meet your needs. Stage gate does allow for us to choose the appropriate process to match the program that we are looking to work on. So the key here is to make sure that the process selected is adaptive and flexible. Certainly it needs to be agile, because things can go off kilter and off track very easily if not followed correctly. And it also needs to be able to have some sort of acceleration if required. And in the stage gate process, there are 3 types that we use here at Sudarshan. If it's a full development process where we're starting from scratch for a new type of chemistry, such as the CICPs that we recently added, our yellow 138, and Violet 23 are all three new types of chemistries that we've added into our portfolio over the last year. So these definitely went through the full stage gate process. However, if a a simpler process is required, there's a stage gate express where the stage 1 and 2 are combined, as well as 3 and 4. And there are just only 2 gates to go through. And then finally, there's also a stage gate light process where stage 1 and 2 are combined, as well as stage 3, 4, and 5. So these are typically done when we take an existing product and we want to modify one of the properties to get to a new place for that new product. So there's a lot that's already known about that product, so a lot of the stages can be compressed and the timeline shortened by using the stage gate light process. Cancellation is always an option. So here it's always key to make sure that we have that option available. I know in R&D it's very difficult to let something go, but there are times when that's the most appropriate answer to make, is canceling a program. So the stage gate process is a number of stages. The first stage, which is actually identified as stage 0, is the idea generation. Here we try to understand the case based on as many clear ideas and accurate information as you can create. This comes from many sources like market research, sales, and customer feedback. We're always listening to what the customers are saying, and we're always listening to what the customers are not saying, so that we make sure that we try to have products to meet everybody's needs. Also, the ideas also are coming from the internal business strategy of the company, making sure that along the way we are developing products that fit that strategy that has been developed. The next phase, stage 1, is the scoping. Here we want to understand and make sure that we have a clear statement of what the problem, opportunity, or the need really is. And what is that market opportunity? And also, here's our first opportunity to try to understand what the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of that particular development program are. Stage 2 starts to build business case. And here we are building the actual product definition and doing the analysis of that particular development program. The business case is fully developed at this point in time. The project plan is also started, and as much information as we can put into that project plan from a capital expense perspective, a timing perspective, regulatory. These are the types of items that need to be addressed ahead of time and put into that project plan. And then finally, the last step in this particular stage is taking a look at that feasibility review. Once all of that information is in hand and on paper, the review of that particular project is done to make sure it's the right thing for your business. The stage 0, 1, and 2 are probably the most key towards a successful project. They are ones that require a lot of upfront homework, and the more information that you can provide in each of these areas, the better and more successful the development program was going to be. Stage 3 is where the development really begins, creating some prototype samples of the product. And here it's critical that we have a timeline developed and we use the SMART practice, where everything is specific, it's measurable, it's actionable, and it's realistic, as well as it is meaningful with respect to time. The timeline always needs to be constantly updated. You've probably heard the statement, you can't schedule an invention. Things go awry within a development program. So when they do, when those items come up, it needs to be returned to the team, and those issues need to be evaluated, and any adjustments to timeline or direction needs to be done along the way. Stage 4 is where testing and validation is taken place. Testing and feedback are critical to the success of the program, and this validation can be done both internally and externally, and they can be done at a number of stages. At the lab stage, we tend to consider this proof of concept, and at the pilot or even a first initial production stage, we might consider this more of a test market opportunity to do that. And so we do partner up with our customers along the way in our product development programs, really just to make sure that we're doing what's required, and that we're on the right track as well. And finally, the last stage, of course, is the launching. Successful uses of stage gate are when they are completely customer focused. This is where our customer relationships that we've been building are very key to this. So as I mentioned, we listen to all of the information coming and feedback coming from our customers, as well as we also try to hear what's not being said as well, so that we dial in all of those needs. As I mentioned, heavy front-end homework needs to be done. That's at stage 0, 1, and 2. Information, information, and information. You can't have enough information when you're putting together a product development plan. Spiral development, making sure that we continue the loop back and forth throughout the process plan, especially with communications, making sure that everybody's on the same page. Holistic cross-functional teams are key, making sure that each needs to come in at the right time. But also the other key thing that I've always found is giving the opportunity to different team members to participate maybe earlier than what is really needed, or even later than what's required of their function, because they may need that information to be more confident in what they're doing as part of that project. Metrics are always key. Data from the information is from the project is key. There's no such thing as bad data. It may not fit the target that you're trying to achieve right now. However, that information may be good for a new product development down the road. So it's always good to have a very good database where that previous data can be retrieved at a later date. Focus and portfolio management. We need to make sure that the program development is in line with the portfolio. And of course, lean, scalable, and adaptable stage gate process. As I mentioned, you need to choose the correct process for the development that you are doing. The gate portion of the process, there are 3 main steps. Of course, the input from the previous gate is the deliveries. The criteria is the metrics that are used to evaluate all of those deliveries. And then, of course, the final output, which is the decision. And there are 5 possible decisions at each gate. You could go on to the next stage. You could kill the program, as I mentioned. That's always a key, and that's always going to be an option. You could hold the project. There might be something that's out there that more information is needed, or a raw material issue that might have to be investigated. Could be anything that says that we need to place a hold on the project until those questions are answered. You can recycle back to the previous stage to do some more work. You could also have a conditional go. Conditional goes are usually when there is missing information, but that information is not critical to the process flow. However, it is the responsibility of the team to make sure that they do get that information as part of that one. So you can't just go on and skip that information that's required. So there's many different types of product development processes that are being used. Another frequent one is the FMEA process, where there's a design section, a process section, and a concept section. And so throughout this presentation, these are the two big development processes that are being used. So I try to equate the two a little bit. So the concept FMEA is equivalent to the stage gate stage 0, 1, and 2. So you've seen this slide before as far as pigment synthesis, where about 75% of the performance comes from the actual chemistry, and the remainder from the finishing and surface treatments that are used for that particular product. So it's key to know all of these as you are going forward with. So a lot of the information is already set up. However, if it's a new chemistry that you are developing, then more information is required more homework is required, I should say, to understand what comes from the chemistry and what comes from the finishing. And it's the application. What kind of color and effect are we looking for? Is it going to be used in conjunction with effect pigments? What application does it need to go into? Is it going to be for indoor or outdoor? So all of that, it has to be considered when developing that product. Obviously, compliance and regulatory is another key area to dial in up front. What kind of costing target are we looking for? And in the same type of application, what kind of value can we bring with this particular product if it might not fit the pricing target? First, the performance. There's a long list of performance properties that are required for the different applications. So it's very important that we as pigment developers understand each and every one of them, and also understand the importance of each and every one of them within the process. Because just like when you are developing a formulation, you are balancing all of the properties against your available raw materials. We too are balancing all of the properties of the pigment as well as the application as well. So it's very important to understand in each category, in each must, want, and nice to haves, which the priority within those categories as well, so that we can balance everything out as best we can to make sure that we get the product that we are looking for. And that's the homework I talked about in that first stage 0, 1, and 2 step. These are the areas that are key, and the more information and the more detailed data that we can bring to the process, the more successful the program will be. So the design FMEA is equivalent to stage 2, 3, and 4. And so you'll notice also that a number of the stage gate processes cross over with the FMEA as well. So I brought a couple of examples for the stage 2 and stage 3 areas that we've done in the past. So in a stage 2 or design FMEA, we are taking a look at pigment yellow 14 for inks, and this is a UV ink formulation where we had 3 objectives to take a look at. We wanted to maintain the viscosity and stability of the current product. In this case, it's our Sudacolor Yellow 155. We also wanted to increase the strength versus the current product, and increase the transparency of the current product. So we put together a quick simple ladder study here with 5 experimental samples and ran it through the formulation to see where we would need to go with this particular program. So opposite the first objective, which is initial viscosity and stability, what we found was all 5 of the experimental samples unfortunately were higher in initial viscosity and did have poorer stability versus the original product. However, opposite objective number 2, which is the strength, all 5 of the products of the samples had much higher strength than the current product. As well as opposite objective number 3, all 5 of the samples also had much higher transparency than the original product. So what we found with this simple ladder experiment was in this same formulation, we were able to match 2 of the 3 objectives that we set out to look for. And so what that led us to do was another quick follow-up experiment where we lowered the pigment loading and potentially providing additional value in use of this particular product if we went forward with this product. Also, we decided to mix some samples together with the original product to help us target maybe another experimental design that we wanted to do. So if we took those follow-up plans and ran it through the formulation again, opposite the objectives against the first objectives, we found 2 of the 5 that we could lower the pigment level to about 17% versus the original 20% loading, and still match that viscosity or even lower the viscosity. So it gives some additional value there. With regards to mixing, we did find that in one formulation that we chose, we did match the initial viscosity, but we did see a slightly poorer stability with that particular formulation. Going on to objective number 2, obviously we were able to match the strength with a couple of the experimental samples. So again, we were getting more value per pound of pigment in this particular case, and both of the mixture samples did also provide us with equivalent strength. So that gives us some additional formulation targets to use going forward. And again, against the third objective, which is the transparency, in all cases, both the lowering of the pigment loading and the mixing still maintained a higher transparency than the current product. So we've got some very good clues to go forward with. And so what we found here in this stage 2, and typically not a lot of lab work is done in a stage 2, so just very simple work like this. So what this does is it allows us to answer a lot of those early questions that are posed in stage 1 part of the process. It also allows us to create more better designed experimental plans for further stage 2s and 3 experiments, which will reduce the amount of resources required as well as time, because we have a good clue as to where to go from these very simple experiments. And then into stage 3 is where typically DOE design of experiments are usually had, and that's where we get into a little bit more complicated, longer time frame. But by using the tools of design of experiments, we can accurately assess the process development. So a design of experiments is a tool that's used to plan, conduct, analyze, and interpret the factors that control a property of a pigment or properties of a pigment in here. And so a well-defined DOE helps to answer what are the key factors of that particular development, what settings would deliver the best performance. Also, it allows us to take a look at the main and the main and interaction effects of the process. So not only do we look, it gives us the ability to look at the key factors, but when two factors are interacting with each other, how they impact the results that you're getting. And then lastly, which is something that's very important once you get to the production side, is what settings would bring about the least amount of variation in the output of that particular process. So to set up the DOE, usually is a 3-step process. The first and most important is to collect and understand all of the inputs and outputs that you want to investigate. And here, you really just start to list everything. And once you have everything down, then you can refine it to meet your needs. The next step is to determine the appropriate measurement for the outputs. And here, we want to have as much objective data as possible. Subjective data can work in a DOE, but it's not as definitive because you're relying on one person's, or maybe it's more than one person's response to that versus physical data. And then lastly, designing the actual matrix that's going to be used. You probably heard the term full factorial, where this is where you're looking at every possible experiment design that you can run. And if you're using a 2-level experiment system, then the number of runs that you would require would be 2 to the nth, where n is the number of factors that you are taking a look at. If that gets to be unwieldy, and it can do that very quickly, you can then use fractional factorials. You can use a standard fractional factorial, or you can customize that to, again, the idea here is to get the most information possible from the data and the experiments performed. Here's an example, a visual example of a DOE matrix with 3 factors, A, B, and C. And a full factorial would be 8 runs, 2 to the 3rd in here. And it also allows you to see how to interpret the interaction effect as well, based on this information. So what we did in Sudarshan is we were taking a look at effect pigments, mica effect pigments, and surface treatments, and how they can impact weatherability. This is was done in a DOE method. So just a little primer about surface treatment. The primary coatings for mica are either titanium dioxide or iron oxide. But we know that titanium dioxide can undergo photocatalytic degradation, and so surface treatments are used to protect that surface. Another area where surface treatments can be impactful is to help to minimize or eliminate wicking action of moisture into the film or part. Because the mica pigments have a high aspect ratio and are hydrophilic, they tend to wick in moisture, and so surface treatments can help retard that as well. So we had 3 objectives in this. So we were taking a look at weatherability in a powder coating formulation. We wanted to understand the impact of chemistry of the surface treatment, of particle size of the mica, and the impact of metal oxide type and the thickness of that on weatherability. So when we sat down, as I said, you want to sit down and take a look at all the factors that you might be interested in. We said we were interested in 3 different types of chemistries, 4 amounts of those surface treatments. Mica sizes, we had 4 that we had in mind. Metal oxide types, we had 4 that we were interested in looking at. Metal oxide thicknesses, we had 2, and comparisons or controls, we had 5. And the first thing that you'll probably think to yourself is, "Eesh, it's huge. It can be huge," and it was. And so what we ended up doing is really customizing this DOE so that we could get the information that we were looking for in a much more manageable size number of experiments to be run. So what we ended up doing is from a surface treatment chemistry, we chose 2 chemistries for 1 particle size in the silver and gold areas, and 1 for all the others. From a surface treatment amount, we chose 3 levels for 3 particle sizes of silver and 1 of the iridescent gold, and then either 1 or 2 levels for the other micas. From a mica size, we were really interested in silver in this particular case because of that catalytic degradation aspect of it. So we chose 4 sizes for silver, 2 sizes for iridescent gold, and 1 size for gold and bronze. Metal oxide type, we did include both the iron oxide and the TiO2. And metal oxide thickness, of course, we just did 2, the silver and the iridescent gold. And from a comparison or control perspective, it was either 1 up to 4, depending on the size and color of that particular mica being looked at. So opposite these 3 objectives, what we found was, for the first objective, which was the surface chemistry and amount, we were taking a look at, this is a very fine 1 to 15 micron silver mica. The chemistry types are a chrome containing as well as a chrome free containing. And what we found was the chrome containing at the higher levels had the best gloss retention properties versus the chrome free versions. And then opposite objective number 2, which was particle size impact. These are again silver micas, and we see that the smaller micas, the 1 to 15 and the 1 to 25, have a poorer response with respect to gloss retention versus the 10 to 60 or the 10 to 100 size range. From a colored retention perspective, what we saw here was the smaller micas did have a poorer response, especially in that 1 to 25 micron aspect of it. And then from the metal oxide type, objective number 3, here we are taking a look at the silver, which is the TiO2. Definitely has a poorer response with respect to both gloss retention and color retention versus the iron oxide only, which is the bronze, and even the combination TiO2 and iron oxide, because the iron oxide is on top of the TiO2, so it protects that photo degradation aspect of it. So moving on, the design and process FMEA is also considered stage 4 and 5 with the stage gate process. And as we are a pigment manufacturer, we talked about the manufacturing steps of pigments, different pigments in the past webinars. So I simplify the synthesis quite a lot in this particular diagram, just really only showing 1 kettle, but it can be complicated. So understanding all of the process steps for each of these areas from the chemistry perspective is extremely critical, as well as all of the options with respect to finishing. What kind of surface treatments are being used, what kind of drying is needed, what kind of milling is needed, and then any other additives used during the blending process. All of these are critical and have to be considered in the development process. So a few examples from past webinars. We talked about the beta blues and the fact that the crude CPC blue that comes in as a very large particle has to be reduced in particle size prior to the pigmentation process. This allows us to establish the strength and dispersibility of that particular pigment. So that incoming crude has to be well, the QC has to be well maintained, as well as the operating parameters of the milling process. For azo pigments, we talked about the coupling and striking process as being key to particle size distribution development. So we talked about the direct and reverse strikes creating a larger particle size distribution, so that creates the more opaque versions, whereas the simultaneous strike will produce a more narrow particle size and a smaller particle size for the transparent versions. So these are some options that have to be considered when designing that particular product. Over to the DPP chemistry. The key area here is in the quenching, which takes care of the particle size and opacity. A lower quench temperature will result in a smaller, more uniform particle size, so that gives us the improved transparency. And then conversely, a higher temperature quenching process will provide a more opaque product for you. Then lastly, in the effect pigment manufacturing, we talked about the coating process is the only place where you're going to get the actual color. So the thickness of that coating will result in the color that you're looking for. So for TiO2, you start out with the silver being the thinnest metal oxide, all the way up to the thickest being green. And on the iron oxide, the thinnest is going to be your bronze, up to the thickest being maroon, and then red after that. So as you can imagine, the R&D pipeline has to be full. And so I go back to that initial slide that I presented where it takes many ideas to get one product out the door. So having many product development funnels, if you will, that are active and in different stages, creates a full pipeline. As you can imagine, you have limited R&D resources to work with, as well as facilities. And so these need to be scheduled, if you will, appropriately, so that you don't have so many projects in the early stage, which requires a lot more laboratory resources, as well as at the end stage with respect to production and scale up, so that we don't overwhelm those teams either. So having a well-defined and well-planned pipeline is key. Now, this is on the front end, the development pipeline. So if we compare this to when a product is launched and we introduce it to our customers, that makes it a little bit more important to make sure we have a full pipeline. Our experience has shown that in the 3 different application areas, plastics, inks, and coatings that we work with, we've typically found in the plastics area anywhere plus minus a 12-month cycle time from the initial samples to when the product begins its commercial use with the customers. Followed by inks, which is somewhere around the plus minus 18 months, and coatings being the longest at somewhere around plus minus 24, 27 type of months in here. So you can imagine in each application area, we want to make sure that we have a R&D pipeline that also matches these types of life cycles, if you will, for the application area. With plastics being the shortest one, we want to make sure that we have several development programs which are anywhere from 12 to 18 months in length. They are spaced out accordingly so that we continue to have products introduced to the marketplace along the way. And then with each successive application area, the pipelines are a little bit more spread out because the timelines are also longer in there, so that we can continue to provide products to match the acceptance cycle times of the applications. So I've shared this with you all before. Considering our pipeline and what we have available, we provide a full portfolio of colorants to our customers in the high performance area with our Sudaperm, in our newer CICP areas with our Sudatherm brand. For the inkjet area, we have our Sudarjets, as well as our solvent dyes with the Sudasols and our Azos, and in the Sudacolor, as well as our Phthalos in the Sudafast. So a wide variety of products to meet your needs, and these areas are always continue to be expanded, and new chemistries are being added along the way. As I mentioned, the Violet 23 and the Yellow 138 are two new chemistries added to our portfolio over the last year, as well as a Pigment Yellow 174. The Sudatherm line of CICPs and solvent dyes are new chemistries in the last couple of years as well. So I've stated this before, I'm just a small part of the North American team, but please feel free to reach out to any one of us with any of your needs, whether it's a sample or information or some additional testing that you might require. We're here to help, so take a reach out, and we'd be happy to help. So next up, we will finish our series with respect to application areas, where we will take a look at the impact of pigment chemistry and finishing on plastics applications, so that this will complete the series. We've already done coatings and inks in the past, so this will complete the series for plastics. That'll be on August 30th, so take a look for that invitation coming up about a week ahead of time. In September, we will skip the webinars, as Sudarshan is very heavily active in a number of technical conferences that we're giving papers at. We will be presenting at the Powder Coating Summit, as well as the CAD Retech in September. So we will take the month of September off from the webinars, and then we will pick it back up in October. By taking a look at color design in the different application areas. So that'll be in October. Just wanted to thank you for your participation and joining us today. And at this point, I'd like to open it up to any questions that you may have.